And at that point, all of my family members had died of cancer or something else.
Wow.
You know, no one had died of old age.
Wow. Wow.
But if I don't make this, jump now, when I'm feeling, when I'm burned out, like utterly burned out, like my health was at risk level of burned out. And, the knowledge of like, my cousins were amazing women who had, so much life ahead of them, so much left they could have given. Why don't I give whatever gifts I have instead of squandering them?
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of F5 Collective Presents Women in Business. And today we are delighted to have with us the amazing Heather Romanowski. Heather is the founder of, I want to make sure I get this right, Bookwhelm. I love it. Book Realm Revisions. Woo, woo. And an incredible editor, and major props. Heather was my lifesaver on a novel I wrote called The Grizzly Gourmet. We won't even get into that, but she just couldn't have done it truly without her, and had the courage to even take the leap to truly put it out there. And she just gave me such confidence. Her notes are amazing. Anyways, I am so excited to have you here with us, Heather, for you to share who you are and your experience with everyone. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Linda. You were amazing to work with. So like that just makes it easier when you have an amazing client. And I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. So let's just get into it, Heather. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, those kinds of fun things.
So I live in Michigan, and I grew up about 30 minutes from Detroit. My childhood was filled with, my grandparents' small lake houses, getting into mischief outside, the typical 90s kid stuff. Some other fun things that are not really within the 90s kid is I used to LARP with the Society of Creative Anachronism with my parents through my childhood. And I grew up playing board game and PC games, and I am lucky enough to have a family who are all readers. So I developed a deep love of reading when I was very, very young, which obviously totally formed my choices of what I do with my life right now.
So was there a specific, sometimes, we think, okay, this was the book that really got me, but was there something in particular or any sort of stories that really made you say reading is so it?
So it started with my dad coming home from work with a book, Harry Potter, the first book. Yep. A lot of kids of my generation, that was the first book. And he brought it home. His colleague had said, you need to read this to your kids. And it happened to be during the time of my childhood where we were doing that reading month where parents had to read, 30 to 50 minutes.
Right.
Like it was, and we had to bring in like the scorecard and stuff like that to school. I got, it was that book. We read the first two, and my sibling at the time also joined that reading month stuff. And so they were reading to us each night. And then my sibling kept falling asleep at like the best parts. And I got tired of waiting. And I mean, it was every night. So it wasn't like I had to wait long, but 24 hours was too long for me. So I started reading the books myself. Yeah, I picked up adult level books, and I never stopped. Once that was the open door. I read Anne McCafferty. I read, I have some original first edition Nancy Drew books from my grandmother. Wow. So yeah, mystery, magic, and dragons. That was my childhood. So.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Oh wow. And so then what led from the reading into the copy editing?
Long kind of trail. Because they don't really teach editing in school. You learn writing. So I went from reading a whole ton to taking a creative writing class in high school because they didn't have grammar classes anymore. That was the closest that I could get.
Wow.
I mean, at least I had a blue ribbon public school education, but they only had so many classes, and if a class wasn't taken enough, they had to take it from the curriculum and use the funding and time for other things.
Yeah.
So my creative writing class, I was taught how to write, and actually that was where I learned the revision process, because we would have to bring our pieces, and we actually had to submit to contests.
Oh, wow.
So I actually had a poem published in a poetry, like teen poetry book. I had a poem published in our local newspaper because we did a poetry slam. And then I had a short story, like my favorite short story to this day, that was also published. And I was actually mad with my teacher because I actually read the terms and conditions, and I was mad because if this site decided to publish my short story, I lost all of my creative rights to it. They took it.
Right. Yeah.
But now as an adult, I realized, well, because I was a minor, they technically probably couldn't do that, let alone the site no longer exists. You can't find it anymore.
Oh, wow.
So that means my creative rights came back to me. In college, I had just joined, and they divided their writing major from the English department. So I could actually go into writing and do what I wanted, because I love British literature, but I did not want to do that for 4 years. Was not my thing. So I actually have a degree in business writing and rhetoric with a minor in business, because I figured if I'm going to go into business communication, I should learn the ins and outs of business.
Yeah.
Doing that, I took a whole bunch of classes. They actually had grammar classes, which I will never look at Weird Al Yankovic's songs again, because that was literally a test question, was punctuating it properly and doing all of the sentence diagramming.
Oh, whoa. Oh, sentence diagramming. Oh my gosh, you just brought up such PTSD for me. Oh my gosh.
I didn't learn sentence diagramming until college.
Oh man.
Or if they did sentence diagramming, it was in elementary and middle school, and you forget it. They don't hammer it. They just don't hammer it in unless you're taking AP classes.
Yeah.
So going through all that, I had a really great time. I had some really awesome professors, and that allowed me to go into technical editing, which was my first job. I spent 10 years in the automotive industry, and then there was a mixture of burnout and boredom. And I'm saying boredom in the fact that I am a knowledge seeker. If I'm not constantly learning and constantly growing, I get very bored. To put it in perspective, in my 10 years, I literally ran out of corporate courses that I could take.
Wow.
Because I was taking 6 to 8 every year. 10
God.
years. They literally ran out for me. And there was a joke among my colleagues that I was doing at the whole department's level of training, because I was doing all of them. So that was what I mean by boredom, is I couldn't grow anymore. I couldn't grow as a person. I couldn't grow professionally anymore. And then I tried to get promoted, and I didn't have enough experience, is what they said. But I learned later that there was some favoritism involved, or rather prior relationships. I was the unknown quantity. The other person was the known quantity. And once that happened, I had no place to go.
Yeah.
So I started looking for another outlet. That outlet happened to be me going to my old stomping grounds, the library that I worked in during college, talking to one of my friends from high school, and her friend saying, "Hey, wait, say that again. What do you do again?" I'm like, "I'm a technical editor." And she's like, "Have you ever done fiction?" I'm like, "Well, no, not since college/high school, but I'll give it a shot." Loved it. She had released, it was a self-published book. She'd gotten some bad reviews, and she wanted to republish it. She wanted to do some more fine tuning. And I adored every second of it. And then I'm like, okay, how do I make this either a side hustle or my eventual future? And that's history. I now do this full time, and I adore every second of it.
So, what was it? Because this is really interesting. What was it that led you to be interested in business editing?
Mm-hmm.
And then what was it that you saw in the fiction that made you say, oh, wait a minute?
Well, I've always loved fiction reading, like
Mm-hmm.
fiction stories. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where that stemmed from. When I was going to college, there was three tracks for the writing and rhetoric course. There was academic,
Mm-hmm.
there was media, and there was business. And I was trying, the one thing I had heard at that point, repeated over and over and over and over again, was that so many people went to college, got a degree, and then the position they ended up in had nothing to do with the degree they started with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I was going to college and paying for that, getting student loans for that, all of that bit, I wanted to make sure that whatever I selected had the most utility.
Right.
Writing, I mean, there wasn't AI at that point. So business writing made the most amount of sense. And then getting a business minor and learning how businesses functioned, that made the most sense to me. I was
Right.
basically trying to make the most of my, $40,000 to $60,000 investment.
Yeah. Yeah. I can feel that.
And then, fiction was always my escape, my
Yeah.
first love. And going from technical, there's certain aspects of fiction editing that benefit from my technical background, and there's certain aspects of fiction that just comes from the fact that I have consumed books for like almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
There's that reader sense of I've read enough of this that I understand instinctively how a story is supposed to be told, and then how do I twist it so that the reader's always surprised?
Yeah.
How do I teach the author to make the twist that they're trying to do more effective?
Yeah.
So that they get an awesome book, they get a loving fan base who's like more, and the fans get what they're looking for, which is a new experience down a familiar, well-worn path.
That's great. I love that. Now, so
Thank you.
what led to book realm revisions? And then as you were doing that, leaping into, okay, I'm going to have this not now side hustle. I'm going to make this a business. What was that like? So
Terrifying. There are still some days that are absolutely terrifying, but most of the time I love what I do. So I started with copy editing because that is what I primarily did. It was the easiest path, the easiest service. There's a lot of courses you can take and certifications that you can get in copy editing. And so before I fully launched my business, I took one of those courses, got one of those certificates, because I was like, okay, I learned this in college, I learned this in high school. Let's make sure I didn't forget anything. Because if I'm going to launch a business and if I'm going to offer these services, I want to make sure that I'm offering the right level of service, because first impressions are important. First clients are important. If you can't impress your first clients, then what are you doing?
yeah.
Mostly stumbling around the dark. Technical editing, when I worked as a technical editor for Audi, copy editing is what I did. I did a little bit of line editing, which for those who aren't aware, copy editing is what most people think editors do. It is the grammar, the syntax, the polishing, but it also includes making sure the timeline's right. How many days have actually passed? Like if you said, this is happening 7 days from now, did you actually accurately chart out that time? If there's moon phases that are relevant to the book, are we actually following the moon phases, or do you have a whole new calendar that we're coming up with? Like all of these consistency things, the things that your readers will notice and may not be able to say what's wrong about it. It's that dissonance between, this is I like this, but there's something not quite right.
Yeah, it's that distant bell that kind of goes off that you're like, yeah.
Yeah, that prevents the reader from suspending their belief and fully immersing themselves in the story.
Yeah.
So technical editing is copy editing, except it's the consistency is the less fun parts of it, but I have to make sure that everything is factually correct. It's consistent, everything's spelled the right way. And by right way, I mean whatever way that they have chosen. So whether it's open, closed, hyphenated, whatever, it's all consistent. So then Book Realm of Visions came out of the fact that, I was burned out on what I was doing. I wanted to learn something new, and fiction was the new, like, you're always learning with fiction.
Yeah.
That's the fun part of it. And even nonfiction, you're always learning with nonfiction too. I just needed to leave the automotive space that I was in at that moment. I've done technical stuff since then. I'm no longer burned out on it, but at the time, that was 10 years of grind.
Yeah.
It didn't help that I found out that I was doing the work of 6 editors, and that was through no fault of my company or my bosses. I had the best team, but they were only allowed so much headcount, and I couldn't keep up. Yeah. There was a level of quality that I prided myself on, and in order to continue doing that, I couldn't keep up with the key performance indices that they wanted me to.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Yeah. And I was physically hurting myself. So I had to separate and, change the, my performance is tied to, my self-image type of thing.
Yeah.
And then, Book Realm of Visions was born out of the fact that I managed to get the amazing client of Magic the Gathering. I've been working on their web fiction since 2020. Wow. And, that helps me build enough confidence and financial cushion so that I had almost like 6 months to almost a year's worth of expenses set aside so that when I quit my corporate job, I wasn't floundering. I had time to find more clients, to devote myself, because basically up until that point, I was, spending 9 to 5, sometimes longer on my corporate job. And then whatever time, then I would give myself an hour to eat, have dinner, maybe go for a walk, say hello to my, he wasn't my husband at the time, my fiance at the time, but now husband, and then dive into my business. It's not sustainable.
Right.
There's a point where you have to make a decision of, am I cutting back on what am I doing, or am I actually going to go forward and build the business? And I chose to go forward and build my business.
Wow. What was that made you say, okay, I'm going to take this leap. I'm just going to do it.
It was, I lost my cousin to cancer.
I'm sorry.
It was a couple of years ago. It was right before I got married. But she always wanted me to write. She was one of my cheerleaders. Sorry.
It's okay.
She was she was the sunlight. When you walk into a room, there's that one person who glows with kindness and love. That was her. And one of the things I wasn't able to give her before she passed was she wanted me to write her a story. And so when I do write the story that she asked for, she'll be dedicated.
Yeah.
And but it was kind of like that leap of, she died young. She died in her 50s.
Bad.
And at that point, all of my family members had died of cancer or something else.
Wow.
No one had died of old age.
Wow.
And at the same time, I lost another cousin not too long after that. She was 42 to cancer.
Heather.
So it was kind of like I'm 30. And if I'm going to do something, I should do it.
Yeah.
I have the ability, I have the time, and if everything crashes and burns in a year, I can always return to corporate life.
Wow.
But if I don't make this, jump now when I'm feeling, when I'm burned out, like utterly burned out, like my health was at risk level of burned out. And, the knowledge of like my cousins were amazing, amazing women who had, so much life ahead of them, so much left they could have given. Why don't I give whatever gifts I have instead of squandering them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that makes
I miss her.
Sense. Yeah.
I still miss them both.
I bet.
But I'm here and I did it, and I would think that they're both proud of me for building what I have, for not squandering my gifts and giving to the world. And eventually I'll be able to sit down and write the coffee table story that she asked for.
Yeah, you will. You will. Do you need a minute? Are you okay?
I'm good. We can continue. I didn't, it's one of those things where like sometimes I can talk about it and like everything's fine. And there's sometimes where it's just like, I wish she was here to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that she's probably watching, but it's not the same as being able to sit down and see like, this is what I did. What do you think? Like, I can't physically show her the cool books that I've worked on. Like, I can't be like, I sent you this book that I worked on. I think you love it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I know, and I'm sorry to hear about that. But I know exactly what you mean with the novel. There were quite a few days I had to stop because my parents weren't around to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And that it takes you by surprise sometimes. Sometimes it's like you said, it's okay,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just not.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 5 years, type of a thing, but sometimes it just feels like yesterday because time is weird.
Yeah, it is. And especially now that you have a child, it's even weirder, right?
Yeah, some days he just turned 2.
Oh my God.
Linda, he just turned 2. Your book is almost 2.
Oh my gosh. Well, look at that. That's all I have to do. All I have to do is contact you and say, hey, Heather, how old is your son now? Okay, good. I guess that means I really need to push this a little bit harder.
Yeah, because, I mean, some days where it's just like, wow, time is so, like, there are moments where it's like time feels like it's crawling, and then there are times where it's like, holy crap, my birthday is in 10 days. Okay.
Okay. There we go.
I'm 36 this year.
How did that happen? I don't know. Yes. Well, that's what is so beautiful about that is the prompting to go for it. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. And
the reality check of the universe saying, hey, you never know how much time you have left.
No, you don't. You don't. And, it's interesting as we talk about like the universe and all of that, it makes me think of, how you have all these really wonderful, glorious interests. And while you were doing the copy editing, it's kind of like the universe is around you. And then you moved into developmental editing and really looking into helping folks with world building, which to me is always about, all that stuff that's going around out there that really speaks to you, that you expand upon. And then, so how did that come about for you? I mean, like I said, I know some of your interests, so to me it's a natural progression, but how did that come about for you? And how do you kind of navigate between the two?
So I moved from copy editing to developmental editing simply because of scope creep. When you do copy editing, if you're going to provide the service, when you go for the certifications, or if you look up, anything, you can look up like what does copy editing entail. It gives you a list. Mm-hmm. I was having a very hard time just sticking to copy editing for my clients. especially since if you're an independent author and you're trying to do it alone, you may not be able to afford the other levels.
Yeah.
For anyone who is not an author or is not an editor, there's a couple different levels of editing. Developmental editing is that first kind of step. It is looking at the big picture elements. I kind of phrase it, you're looking at the health of the entire rainforest, the rainforest being the book, from a bird's eye view. You're making sure that the plot makes sense. There's enough world building detail to make it feel real without bogging down the pacing of the book, and that the characters are someone that like you'd want to meet. Like there's someone that you feel like you could see them on the street and see that they're a real person. Copy editing is looking at every individual plant in that rainforest. You're checking that the sentence structure is correct. You're doing all of the fact checking, all of, timeline. You're trying to hunt down as many typos as you can, because as we are all aware, even with traditionally published books, there's a misplaced comma, a missing period. There is, dessert when there should be desert, stuff like that, that just somehow gets through, and you're just like, 40 people looked at this and yet you exist. And you're, ensuring the consistency and like the author's word choice, spelling, hyphenation, how numbers are formatted, all of that. When I was copy editing, I would notice basically developmental issues. Yeah. And at the time of copy editing, like you don't really want to be doing developmental stuff. Mm-hmm. So the way that I addressed that was, okay, I'm going to go look at developmental editing courses and make sure that I'm doing this right. And basically, my teacher was like, yeah, you have a real knack for this. Like, you understand all of this. Here's some feedback, but like, you got this. And I'm like, cool. I can now offer this as a service.
Yeah, very good.
And most of what I do now is actually a combination. I'll do a developmental editing pass or a line editing pass, which I'll explain in a second. And then I'll do like a copy editing pass. Mm-hmm. So I will split my services. For those who don't know, for me, line editing, actually listen to the book. So I will sit there and have, Word or Google read it to me. And I will make sure that the pacing's right, that the characters' voices are correct. And for me, when I'm listening to it, it's like a movie unfolding in my mind. Mm-hmm. And anytime there's like a hitch in the film, that's when I stop and I go and, do a editing tweak or ask a question or, offer suggestions and resources and stuff like that. So that's how that kind of all came to be. And I like the fact that I offer, different levels in combinations that you could, if you really need the developmental help, we can just do a straight developmental edit. If you have done a developmental edit and you need someone to like polish everything, we can talk about line editing or copy editing. But typically my client favorites are either a developmental and copy edit or a line and copy edit. Those are my most popular packages, basically.
Got it. So you have been, I know that your love is fantasy and science fiction and all these beautiful worlds in there. And how did you get to that? And I know that you talked about, dragons and so forth when you were talking about you're starting to read, but how did you get to that? And then into that whole idea of being able to help your authors understand the difference between like these, it's a series or it's a world building, those nuances that they need to understand.
So what I kind of recommend for editors kind of in general is edit what you love first. Because one, it'll bring you lots of joy. Two, you will have that instinctive knowledge of how it should go. Mm-hmm. So I've read, Anne McCafferty, Tamora Pierce, Sarah J. Maas, Leigh Bardugo, Ilona Andrews. I've read, Nalini Singh. I've read all of these amazing, science fiction and fantasy authors throughout my lifetime. They all have their different flavors, different twists on different things. And so I can kind of see, like, it's kind of like watching a movie that you know that you're going to really enjoy. But you kind of know the formula of the story. And it's always great when someone manages to pull off something else. So my base loves science fiction and fantasy, but I love all these subgenres that have come out. I love cozy fantasy, and like cozy mysteries and romantasy and all of these different genre bashings, because that's taking these two paths that you already have wide fan bases and then bringing them together in a way that, makes something new and super enjoyable. So it's making sure, that, your romantic fantasy, you have the fantasy elements and then you have like the big romance plot that, kind of runs through it versus, cozy, which is like bringing, like low stakes stuff. But, has, there's still tension in it, but it's not going to be like world ending apocalyptic zombie tension. So I have all these interests because I enjoy switching it up. I want, cozy fantasy to go with my zombie, because if I'm dreaming about zombies all the time, like I'm not getting the best amount of sleep. I'm currently reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, so all I've been doing is living in a horror, as the author put it, horror with a little bit of sugar frosting on it, for the past month.
Fun.
It is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. But then after I'm done with this particular binge, I'll probably pivot to something else because, I keep up with everything that's going on. Like there's this new best-selling author in this genre. Okay, I need to read that because that's what the fans want now. And to guide my authors, to, be able to, tell them like, hey, like the market's kind of saturated now with all of this, but that doesn't mean that you should stop. By the time you finish publishing it, like we'll be out of like this big thing, there'll still be new readers who'll be coming to this big thing, but the market will have already moved on to the next trend.
Right.
Like sports fantasy, like Heated Rivalry doing the sports romance stuff. That's huge right now. But 6 months from now, there'll still be, fans coming to that. But we're gonna go to Barnes and Noble, and there's gonna be something else on that big table.
Right, exactly. So the world, this whole idea of world building. If you can speak to that a little bit, because as we were talking about earlier, a lot of people don't fully understand that there is a difference. We all understand that there's like one-off books and they are whatever they are. But interestingly enough, there could be a ton of world building that goes into creating that one-off book, right? So if you can speak a little bit to that whole idea of world building and the unique difference between, it's a series or it's a this or whatever.
So in order to start any book, you have to fiction book specifically, nonfiction, the world's already there. But for fiction, yes, the world should be there. But for fiction books, you have to start with this idea of a world. So, most authors that and even game developers, like when you're selling a game, like you have to have, like, if there's like a story behind it, there's a world that you're building with it. So you start with an idea. And that could be something as simple as, well, what if this happened?
Right.
Then you have to build from that. If you're creating a brand new space, a brand new alternate universe or something like that, you have to ask the questions of, what's the government like? Does a government exist? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? Are there nations? Are there tribes? Are there, you have to get a somewhat political structure. If you're looking at cozy fantasy, you're looking at like the day-to-day minutia. What if they're in a small village or a medium-sized village, like what's there? What biome are they in? What creatures appear there? What plants are available? Is there, what level of magic is available? Is magic common? Like, does everybody have a little bit? So like things are easier, or is it like big scale, like, moving mountains and, changing the landscape is like, if you're thinking about like, if we're talking about like something like The Witcher, there's small signs that do tiny things. And then there's what the mages do, which everyone's pulled into a central school so they can learn because they can literally alter the fabric of the universe. Yeah. So, high fantasy versus low fantasy, how much magic is in the fabric of the universe type of a thing, or not. Right. If we're looking at sci-fi, what technology is available? Like, where are we at with that? Like, is everyone in a hovercraft? If we're looking at Star Wars, like, are we looking at Coruscant or are we looking at Tatooine? Mm-hmm. What is the availability of technology? What is, what do the rich look like? What do the poor look like? And where do most people stand? Yeah. You have to answer, you don't have to answer all of those questions, but you have to start answering some questions. Like, if you start from a character, what does their life look like? What's their backstory like? And you can start from there and kind of build the universe out. Some people like worlds. They have like, I have this idea of this part of the universe, we haven't discovered yet. And I have like all these ideas and like, what's the world like? And then they build the characters after they have, built this amazing world. Neither way is incorrect. It's just where your imagination grows. So for a standalone book, you need some idea of some part of that because you need the structure to support the character's journey. The plot lines will be shorter because you want to tie up like most, if not all, of those loose ends by the end of your book. Mm-hmm. And so you're kind of skimming the top layers of that universe you created versus a series where you can turn the loose ends from the current book into hooks for the next one. And you can have all those evil cliffhangers to torment your readers. And with the series, you have the option of diving deep into this universe that you've created and explore like different facets, countries, questions, like you can continue. And then, you can also do spin-offs that, take place in other parts of the country or different storylines. Because like some series are like follow one particular character versus, like other series are like each character has their own book in this series, but all of the narration, all ties to each other. Type of a thing. Or you can have something like Game of Thrones where each book has a whole bunch of point of views in it, which for if you're trying to appeal to newbies to fantasy and sci-fi, that can be very overwhelming. There's, like Game of Thrones have so many characters. Some of them don't last a full chapter, type of a thing. And there's just a lot of things to keep track of. But for like the hardcore sci-fi fantasy people, like that is where that they love that. Yeah. Whereas for someone who's like, I got like an hour to read this tonight, and like because I have a very strict schedule, and like this is what I've got. You're gonna want to go for something like where it's maybe 1 to 2 point of views type of a thing, or just one point of view. Yeah,
wow, that's really helpful. And so as you're working with your as an editor, how do you work with your clients, the authors, to help them? Understand whether it's world building or whatever the case may be, but that's a unique relationship. It's an incredible collaboration. And so what are some of the processes that you have, or what have you discovered as you've been doing this with your clients?
Well, the worst part is some of my clients are like, I have all these lore docs for you. And I'm like, and I can't read any of them. The lore docs are great and the timelines, stuff like that. But if I'm your developmental editor or your book coach, I'm literally I'm your tester. Like I have to go in cold. Yeah. So that way I can, draw the lines where I say, okay, there's a little bit too much exposition here. We need to like break this up a little bit more, or, hey, like we could use a little bit more detail here about this. And then I'll try to kind of ask the question more directly of like, do you mean, this, what does this, we need a little bit more detail about the village on a scale. Like, what do the buildings look like? What can they smell? What do they see? What does everyone dress? Because those wide pan shots, if you can balance them correctly, tell a lot to the reader about the status of the world and what they're, what they're getting into, just as much as, zooming in on that particular character. So I will go through and I do, if I notice something, I'll ask a question like, hey, we could use, a scent or a sound here to balance this because you need a little bit more sensory detail to draw the fan in. If we're trying to like describe something, I'll be like, hey, I have a question. Like, do you mean this? Like, we're going in this direction? Like, this is the type of government? Or, like this type of government? Like, I'll try to be more concrete with my queries because I want to give direction, not just, hey, you need to fix this. Like, you need to be more, I try to be more concrete with it. That way they can pull from their world building. And then like my favorite part is actually, as you know, all of the meetings that we can just sit and brainstorm.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is, here's, I'll do it intro. We'll have a chat about the book. When I'm starting my process, we'll have a chat about the book, what your goals are, timelines, budget, all of that, and we'll figure all of that out. Sign it, we go. Then is like, hey, do you want more coaching with this? And I kind of tell authors like you get a couple free meetings, and then if we're doing like a book coaching package along with it, because I now offer that after manuscripts and that process, and seeing how helpful like book coaching in general is, I offer a book coaching package alongside of it to say, hey, we're going to have more meetings. So this could be accountability meetings. This could be, hey, I understand the plot hole you pointed out in this chapter, but I need help figuring out how to handle this. And so we'll just talk. We'll talk about the world. We'll talk about, what's going on in the scene. We'll talk about what the goal of the scene is, and we'll hash it out.
Yeah.
And then, they'll return the manuscript. And I'll go through my second pass, whether that's copy editing, line editing, second developmental edit pass, and keeping all of those goals in mind of, all right, did we accomplish the edit that you put in? Did that accomplish, the goal of the question?
Yeah.
Is this something, is the reader hooked? Is everything explained in a way that's digestible and easy and makes it, easy to pick up and put down, or make it really hard for the reader to put down?
Yeah.
Thinking of Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, and it was like, I don't need sleep, I need answers type of energy.
Right.
Because you always want that in the last 100 pages of a book. Is just like, nope, it's 1 a.m. and I choose to not sleep tonight.
Yeah. I got to know what happens. I
I might be crying at the end of this, but I need to know. So it's very much a give and take. This is why when I'm onboarding an author, I not really insist, but I really highly tell them like, hey, I want to have either a phone call or like a Zoom or Google Meet chat. I prefer Zoom, but if they, want to use Google, they can, because it's a collaborative thing. I am your cheerleader. I try to be your kind teacher as I guide you through this process, because writing and editing can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that, I'm providing the support that you need to get through this, because as you said, there are some days where it's like, I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's absolutely okay. And it happens. But, in the end, if you want to finish your book, you pick up that pencil, you pick up your keyboard, and you start again. I always advise, I have a mentee, and I am the president of the Editors Tea Club. So I try to foster kindness between the author and the editor, because no one knows everything that's going on in each other's lives. And that little extra bit of human kindness can go a long way. Always communicate when you have questions. Let the other person know if there will be a delay as soon as possible. And even better, if you can give a new deadline, either on the author side or the editor side, try to give a new deadlines that you know realistically that you can meet without like killing yourself.
Yeah.
I had a client who lost his mom last year, just as we were getting started. And he's like, I think I can get back in a month. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Please take all your time. And then a month came on. He's like, I'm still having a rough time. And I'm like, that's perfectly fine. And, at the end of it, he's like, thank you so much for being so kind and, open to moving our contract and rescheduling everything. And I said, I'm human too. I have a lot of family members. I still have my parents, and I hope that my clients at the time that I lose my parents are as kind as I can be. Like, it's no skin off my back to be kind.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's true. It's I like what you said as far as, we are all human, and we really don't know what that other person is going through. It's one of the things that I took to heart when I started giving notes, learned how to give notes on certain things, and just to remember to do it from a place of support and it's feedback. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing my thoughts, and it's your story, it's your whatever. And, instead of that was just ridiculous. Why'd you do? And it's like, really? Do you have an agenda or something? Is there something I don't know? Are you having a hard day? Just take a minute. So
I'm like, did you need a cup of coffee? Did you, or even better, did you only have coffee today and you forgot to eat?
I know, it's so true. Oh my God.
I am guilty.
Then maybe take a minute and just, I know. Well, you work so much across, your clients are across all of these different, platforms. So you work with not just books, but games and all of that. What do you have to kind of switch through to help people tell their stories across these different platforms?
Okay. So I am a second generation D&D nerd. I actually play D&D with my parents and their friends.
Oh, I love that. So cool. That's so cool.
It is so cool. We played last night, actually. Wednesdays are typically the nights we play. And I can't wait to share it with my son because it'll be lots of fun. So for gaming, I grew up playing board games. I started playing D&D in college with my husband. We actually started with Pathfinder. And then, so I have this basis of reading, PC games, board games, tabletop games.
Got it.
And the fun thing about doing a tabletop game is often it helps you with storytelling. I have a couple authors who write books now who, when they have written themselves into a corner, they will actually pull out the dice. They've actually made character sheets for their characters, and they will just be like, all right, we're going to roll and see what happens.
Wow.
So like if they're trying to, they'll roll like, if they're just like, okay, could my character actually think their way out of this? They'll roll an intelligence check to see like if they do well or if they do terrible. It's like, okay, they did terrible. Okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? They rolled a nat 1 on this. What is the worst thing that could happen? And then write that scene, see if it fits with what they want. Because sometimes it works and sometimes it's like, okay, I wrote out the scene, I role played it that way. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. It doesn't quite fit with the rest of the story. But I know how it doesn't fit with the story now.
Right.
So now I can go back and rewrite the scene and fix it. So it helps with like writer's block. Like if you're having a hard time figuring something out. I'm working on D&D supplements right now. And so because I have I have this background as a player and GM of Dungeons and Dragons, I can go through and be like, okay, as a GM, we need to, like if we're going to format it this way, we need to make it consistent, because the worst thing is when you're like, okay, why does this country have all of this information, but this country has like half of that?
Wow. Yeah.
Why? I'm just like, obviously this country was the author's favorite, but my characters decided to go here. And I have nothing. And the hardest thing as a DM is when you are, like they decide to pivot to go here and you have nothing to pull from, and suddenly you're just like, all right, everyone, here's our food break. We have half an hour. During that half an hour, you don't even have time to eat because you're trying to figure out where everyone's going because they went off the path that you set. And then I'm also working on helping to develop a war game. So like for Warhammer 40K and like Napoleon, like that type of thing. A lot of fun comes from bringing my love of history in it and seeing how we, twist it to include vampires, elves, dwarves, orcs, not just humans. And like, how do we make it so that the humans aren't squashed? How do we balance this? Like seriously, vampires, super strong, like, elves, orcs, all that. How do we make it so the humans aren't the weakest race? Because I play video games and I hardly ever play the race of human. I'm a human in everyday life. I want to be an elf today. I want to be a genie. So, I've played all these games widely, so I can go and say like, well, like for rule sets, like this doesn't, and actually for gaming, my technical editing comes into this because step-by-step process. Step-by-step process. You need to make sure that the rules make sense, that there is a flow to it, that if there is a definition, the definition is actually somewhere in a glossary, because if I'm a first-time player into this game, what if I didn't study military history? How many units are in a brigade? How many are in a division? What is the hierarchy for, sergeant, corporal, general? Like, what does that hierarchy look like? Like having all of that there for the player and, players and the game masters to be able to sit and be like, okay, like I can make this, easy to play type of a thing. All of that. It's complex. It's fun. It is a good balance. Like I balance my book editing with like my game editing because they both bring different challenges. They both stretch me in different ways, and I learn new skills from both. Or I find out, hey, I need to go read more of this particular genre because I really like it, and I feel like I need to learn more. I also just picked up the specialty of cookbooks because I'm a hobby baker. And one of my clients was like, I would really love to do a fantasy cookbook that is aligned with my world. And I'm like, that sounds like fun. We'll add that to our future docket whenever we have time to sit down and write a cookbook together.
Yeah. Yes. As someone who does recipe testing, it's quite something. So it's quite the journey, isn't it? Wow. Oh, that's okay. So now you, what's so cool about all of this and having this ability to move across these different genres and these different areas? You have a very, I'm guessing that you have quite the bird's eye view of how AI is, kind of being incorporated. And something that I know that you are doing is that you're actually helping authors understand how to utilize AI for their benefit as opposed to fear it. So why don't you speak a little bit to that?
So AI is tricky. We haven't defined the middle ground, really. There's proponents, like we see everywhere now. AI is being pushed into everything. There's billions and trillions of dollars of these major companies that are, going all in on AI. People are losing their jobs because of AI. We're hearing about the environmental cost of AI, where like these data centers have been put in and literally the residents don't have water during certain parts of the day. And their electrical bills are going up because they're not environmentally sustainable. So, and then we have this other side of it of where like AI can be like super helpful, but also it still hallucinates. And then, we heard about Mythos and how like it's so good at what it does that they don't want to release it yet, except to some core people, because if they like wide release it, then not just people who are doing good with it, but also the bad actors will get a hold of it and do a whole lot of harm.
Yeah.
So I have one of my current favorite authors is Alona Andrews, and there's two quotes that I'm going to kind of shorten that I've reread these books over and over and over again, and these two quotes kind of have formed the basis of my business. The first is very bluntly, adapt or die. And the second is very truncated to, I need the decisions that I make, I need to be able to look myself in the mirror.
Yeah.
So balancing the two of those, I need to be able to adapt to the current AI situation, and I need to be able to still look myself in the eye. Which means that my current stance is I will not put any of my clients' work through generative AI, because I wholly disagree with the fact that these large language models were created off of the unconsenting backs of authors, singers, songwriters, musicians, artists. All of our creativity is been put into this.
Yeah.
And even though there's now licenses between big companies for it, the point is these were all started off of our unconsenting work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I will never feed it to generative AI, period. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't adapt, because AI is not going away. Even if this boom pops, this bubble that we're in pops, AI is still going to be embedded in our everyday life. And it is useful as long as we make the right decisions with it. So how I see AI being useful is, if you're a nonfiction writer, you can use AI to search for the research that you need.
Right.
You'll still need to read through that research and make sure it actually aligns with your vision, and that you can get the rights to cite it. But that searching, for my time with manuscripts and working with nonfiction writers there, that search is so time sensitive. Like, it's so time intensive to just sit there and like find all this research. And then the hard part is sometimes it's like really, really hard to get the permission to use it without paying a lot of money.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So having AI actually look for a list and have you be able to like sort through and figure out like how you can cite it, how you can get permissions, like all that's like really, really helpful. Marketing. It's really hard to continually create new content to help market yourself. So one of the ways that I've seen AI used appropriately is, and this is the other thing, when I have used AI with one of my clients that I partner with, they use AI for some of their marketing stuff. The best thing you can do to deal with the guilt of environmental cost is making sure that you fine-tune your prompt so you only have to ask it once.
Got it. Oh,
That
that's
way,
good.
That way I'm using the least amount of resources to get the output that I want.
Yeah.
I try to fine-tune it to, if I can, one prompt with the possibility of like, I need you to condense this or tweak it. And then I take notes on how I tweaked my prompt to incorporate it the next time.
Got it.
That way I'm closer and closer to that one prompt, I get the output I want. So for marketing, you can ask AI to come up with 50 questions related to your industry that you could answer in blog posts or media marketing. And then cherry pick the ones that you haven't answered.
Got it.
Sometimes maybe go 100, because like, as if you've already answered like a whole ton of like the top 50 questions, well, then you need 100, and then you can find all the really weird esoteric ones that you can brainstorm on.
Yeah.
The other way that I have seen AI be helpful is actually note taking.
Right.
During
Yeah.
meetings. so that you can focus on being productive in the meeting and take minimal notes. I am the type of person who needs to take some level of notes in meetings because it helps everything stick. But if I have a note taker going, which I always ask ahead of time if we're going to be allowed for that, because some people still don't like it, and that is perfectly fine. If I have the note taker going and then I'm still writing my notes, because sometimes when I'm handwriting something, I will come up with other brainstorming ideas that I don't necessarily say out loud.
Yeah.
But I won't come to that conclusion unless I'm actually physically writing it down.
Yeah.
So then I'll go back to the note-taking notes and take a look at it and then make sure everything that I wrote down is included in that. And then I can say like, hey, as I was taking notes, I also thought about these things. What do you think? And then I can send the notes off to my client because they're always included. Like if I have a note taker going, they always get the summary of everything so that we're all on the same page.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. And then my final thing is if you are creating something that needs data center space, pick ones that are more sustainable and prioritize mitigation of their environmental impact.
Okay.
So if you're a developer of some sort and or you're building a website or you're building a video platform or you're building any sorts of platforms, do the research to find which data centers are actually prioritizing our planet.
Got it.
See if you can host your space there, because if everyone's more prioritizing the data centers that are environmentally sustainable, there will be more that will be built that way.
Right.
And then in my personal life, because I live in Michigan and we have a lot of water here, we are the largest freshwater source in the world. There's a lot of data centers that are currently being built here, or they're trying to be built here. And what I will do in my personal life is try to advocate to make sure that the ones that are being built here are on closed loop systems, that they're mitigating our environmental impact, and that the data centers are not going to raise all of our electrical bills because they're going to be, they're not going to be just draining the grid. They have to be part of improving the grid and making our grids more environmentally sustainable and better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's really helpful. And that points out some really interesting things that I don't think a lot of people think about, when they're thinking about AI, quite frankly. So that really points out a lot of really great points to keep in mind as you're moving forward, and also how you can make friends with it and be smart with it. Yeah. Because you're right. Adapt or die. Right. We got to do it.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere. Like if it was going to just suddenly die, it would have done so. It's been 3 years since AI came on the scene. If it was going to die, it probably would have done so by now. It's it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's, being put into things that we don't think it's, we don't know. Like I literally got my iPhone 14 because iPhone 15 already had AI in it. And so any iPhone 15 Plus already has AI built into it. iPhone 14 was the last one that didn't. And eventually my phone's going to die.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that by the time we get to that point where I need a new phone, there'll be some sort of, the seesaw will be less seesaw-y and will be more neutral. And I'll be able to hopefully choose what AI is in my phone, or being able to decide, how it's being used in my phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, hopefully you could have at least choice.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. Because sometimes we don't get a choice, or they'll do an update and then you have to go back through and make sure they didn't undo all the choices you previously made.
Yeah. That's like a whole other conversation. Oh my God.
It is. That's a whole other tangent, but it's true. We all have to do it.
Yeah, we do. We do. So now, as far as I want to get to some of the storytelling stuff that you're very excited about in just one second. But one thing I want to talk about is, you've mentioned manuscripts and so forth. Independent publishing, hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing. How Because this does lead into what I know that you're very excited about with
Mhm.
storytelling and some of the cool stuff that's going on out there. How has that, I don't know, sort of changed how either readers or authors experience, putting their books out there, and readers experience the books themselves, and receiving their stories by having these now different avenues to be able to find authors that maybe they wouldn't have found before,
Mhm.
and for authors to be able to have a voice in a way that they wouldn't have had before.
I think it's really awesome. So, one of the hard things about traditional publishing is there's a lot of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not their fault. We like to read what, is our cup of tea.
Yeah.
And if there isn't enough diversity and inclusion in the people who hold the power to publish what we all read, then the perspectives that some people will never see or desperately need to see, they need to see themselves in the story, they're not going to get told.
Yeah.
So I like how things have kind of changed, because when I was working in college was when self-publishing actually started. So I've got to see, at that point I was like, well, it's not going to have, good enough quality. It's not going to have all of these things. But as I've gotten, more into the publishing side of the industry, and I've grown to see it, there's a balance. My favorite author is Alona Andrews, the quotes that I talked about. They actually are hybrid publishers now. They were traditionally published, and then because they had stories that didn't fit within the vision of traditional publishing, they published them on their own. And so now they have like these whole series that are self-published that are adored by their fans, that are just as good as what they published traditionally. And they're able to decide. They don't have to they don't have to ask for permission to make a change that they know fits the story.
Right. Right.
So there's less gatekeeping. There's more stories that are able to be told. It's easier than ever to build an audience and get your work out there. But it's harder to be seen, because we all know that when you have a traditional publisher, they assist with the marketing. They used to do most of the marketing. But now with the rise of social media, authors still take that up. They have to, have a social media presence. That's part of their contracts. And then if you're the side part of that I really enjoyed, this other, new thing, I don't want to say new, but it's been rising in the last couple of years, is where self-published authors are getting picked up by traditional publishers because their stories are loved, and they're getting contracts that benefit them and give them wider reach.
Yeah.
Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldtree, Matt Dinneman, Dungeon Crawler Carl, he was self-published. He has the Patreon, and now he was picked up by Penguin Random House. That's his representative, and they republished everything. And he also has he has games. I think his game is now #1 most funded game on Kickstarter at the moment.
Wow.
so like that's the benefit. It's expensive. Yes, to get started, because the cost of self-publishing is you have to do everything yourself. You wear all the hats. You have to interview the editors, the illustrators, the layout, all of that, because if you don't put out a polished product, it's not gonna go over well.
Yeah.
Or we have manuscripts where they're hybrid publishers, where they assist with the process. You still pay that fee, but you own your creative IP still.
Yeah.
Because the distribution is just hard. And especially there's a lot of stuff in the last couple of years with the industry where, distribution outlets are getting, slimmer and slimmer about how you can distribute, like Baker and Taylor going under, which is where libraries got a lot of their distribution. Who's going to fill that hole? Amazon's trying to step in. Other people are trying to find other things, because not everyone wants to go with Amazon. But there's Ingram Spark and stuff like that. So it's amazing. And I'm happy to see that self-publishing and hybrid publishing have kind of balanced the power scales so that
Yeah.
more stories are told that need to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very exciting. And so that now leads us to, what are you excited about? I know you've got some stuff coming. What are you excited about? What's on the horizon with you and the world of storytelling?
So I've been working with Elder Glade Publishing for the last couple of years. Athena, the owner of Elder Glade, had this, what she was told was a somewhat crazy idea of fair trade publishing model. And she's been told for longer than I have been working with her that it was impossible. It was, not viable. She's had developers tell her, that, what she's asking for is impossible. Like, you can't build something like this. Well, she decided to do it herself because she is a wonderfully driven, amazingly creative human who has, if she's like, okay, I don't have the skill set, I'm going to go get it.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely look up to her as like, you're the type of person that I want to be when I grow up. So she has created what's called Storyverse Stream. It is a first of its kind, creator first, community based platform that is meant for world builders, big and small. On the fan side, for the reader side, it is a all-in-one subscription platform that basically combine at the moment. I will say that at the moment, because she's building it herself. That means that if anyone has suggestions or questions or expansion, like, she can do it. She can add these things. So where we currently stand as of this recording, it combines Kindle/Nook, Audible, YouTube, like Ko-fi's tipping, Kickstarter, Etsy, Steam, Instagram into one platform. So you can, and like Reddit, discussion platform stuff into one space. So that you can go and see like everything that a creator has to offer. On the creator side, there's collaboration opportunities, there's legal support, you are getting quarterly royalties, so you have a steady stream of income of like, when it's coming, how much you're getting. You have the ability to build your support team because building to scale can be super isolating. But the system that she has created allows, big picture creatives to find one another and collaborate. If you have freelancers that, so say you're an author who's been in the business for 20, 30 years, and you have a team of freelancers that you like, these are your people. You can invite them onto the platform to streamline your work processes because you can submit work items, tasks, assign things, because it includes basically like Slack and like Todoist, and like we're working on adding kind of like a Trello type thing to it, or a Notion.
Wow.
Like, that's in the future type of it. Like, those are the next steps, so that all the work is there. You can set deadlines, you can see where it is. You're not trying to send a 200,000 word manuscript through Gmail, which you can't. You'd have to turn it into a Google Doc, or you have to compress it into a PDF, which compromises the integrity of the sheet. Yeah. You don't have to worry about that with this. You can just upload it without having to go through Dropbox or any other third-party service that can hold on to that. But the best part about this whole thing is it has an intricate lore integration that makes the book shine, offering maps and history that you can't find on any other platform. And it's all baked into the text. You're able to, as you're going through, you can switch from the text to the audio book as you're like saying, like, you're reading and like, oh, I got to get in the car, switch to the audio book. It's already there. Because it's all in one platform. You are able to, and as one of the clients has told me, is like, as a creator, I'm able to actually craft a version of the books in digital form that you could only dream of in a standard ebook experience, because it's like the ebook's final like form. It allows for more in-depth, rich environment to create in, and that unlike other platforms, he's not constantly being hounded to integrate AI into every aspect every 2 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a place for creatives with universes that, like all those lore docs that I was talking about earlier, you can actually put it into space. You can actually put it into a visual and written space. You can have your character art there and all the stuff. And we're actually making it so that you can spoiler things so that if you go to read something, like it's not like opening up a Wikipedia page where it has everything. You can actually spoiler it to where you are in the story. So like if you haven't read book 2, you're not going to see the book 2 character arc.
That is cool. So cool.
You can, and because they have the partnership with a game system, like you can actually crowdfund for a video game of your book or story. Wow. You can crowdfund for a TV like series and stuff like that. Like we're actively working on the partnerships right now so that a creative, if the fans want something, they can tip for it and you don't have to, there's no extra platform fees because it's already in the same space.
Wow.
It's so cool.
It's very cool. And we're going to have Athena on, so we'll be able to dig even further into Storyverse Stream and her story, and that's going to be great.
Well, so much fun.
This opens up such a world of possibility, and for storytellers and so forth. And so, we're going to dive into the business minute in just a second. But do you have anything else you want to share? Are there any last thoughts before we kind of dive into those kinds of things?
So my last thought is for everyone to keep creating and keep learning, big or small, and keep your childlike wonder alive because there's so many cool things in the world, in the works, coming, and you just have to, know that it's there.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, we're going to do two questions from the Founder Deep Dive, just simple questions. What would you do if someone suddenly gave you $500,000, my dear?
First off, I would say thank you and make sure I was the correct recipient. And then if there was any, like if it was just straight up $500,000 to do with whatever I wanted, I'd pay off the house that I'm moving into, all the student loan debts, and invest in my business's marketing goals to get closer to the agency that I'm trying to build so that I can bring all of my favorite freelancers that I work with under one roof and make sure that they have the work to keep their livelihoods going.
Nice. Okay. What is one reality of building your business that rarely gets talked about?
So in the editing world, there is talked about the feast and famine cycle, where sometimes you have a famine and you have like no work and then suddenly you have a whole bunch of work. That doesn't go away, but it changes what it looks like. And so the famine cycle will sneak up on you when you're in feast mode and you're too busy to market yourself through blogs, podcasts, or cons because you're trying to deliver what you have. And then you're in famine mode and try to do all of the marketing so that you can, fill that up. It changes because when you're on the internet and you're trying to find work, you'll see people say like, I'm booked until next year. And then you feel like you're failing. Or you see people say like, I get $10,000 a month in work. But the thing is like, no one tells you like, what does that actually look like? Right. Booked for one editor is empty for another. So it depends if they're full-time freelance or if they're part-time, what other things are they doing? Because due to everyone's unique circumstances, it's best to keep in mind that everyone's plate size is also flexible and that, just because you're in a famine mode right now doesn't mean you're going to be in a famine mode forever. Even though, like, especially right now, the job market is so bleak. There's people who have been looking for jobs for a couple of years. There's people who've been, and, it's, when you're out on LinkedIn or other spaces, it can be really hard to be like, well, I don't want to celebrate my win that I got this amazing client because I don't want to feel like I'm boasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just for any, for editors in the business, new editors, like It's okay. The feast-famine cycle, it happens. It's going to continue happening. Just be cognizant of, making sure that when the next famine cycle hits, you are less panicky about it.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do the business fit.
Yep.
And whatever you want to talk about.
So my business insights are just in general, like business, like editing business, but also applies to other freelance things. First thing, research your market. You want to make sure you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So if you're going into governmental contracting, nonfiction, fiction, research it. Make sure you know that when you're putting you make the best first impression possible. 2, network with your tribe of people. For the introverts who are listening to this, I know it is hard, but it's important, because the next tip is you don't want to isolate yourself. Creative pursuits are often isolating, so you want to find your community. You need to find your sanity point. You need to find the person who'd be like, am I overthinking this? Have I edited this to death? Have I lost my objectivity? You need your edit buddies. Next one, be flexible. As we discussed, technology propels changes that require us to continue learning and growing. Don't stay stagnant. Adapt. And the last one is set your boundaries and know when to keep them or bend them. Because your boundaries will be tested every day if you have a toddler. And you need to know when you're saving your sanity, or I've got a medical bill, and even though this client isn't the best fit for me, I need to pay that medical bill. So even though they don't quite fit, I'm going to do the best I can. And the caveat to that is don't take on a project you can't deliver on. Because regardless, even if it's not the best fit client, you want to make sure you deliver a quality piece back to them. Period. As the business owner, your face, your reputation is everything.
Yeah. So. Great. Beautiful. Okay, rapid 5. You ready?
Yes.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
An adventure librarian like Evelyn from The Mummy, or a dragon rider?
Totally attainable, both of them. I think you could do both at the same time. You could be riding a dragon while you're an adventure librarian. Yeah, absolutely. What always makes you smile?
My child's, or books and game stores and sunsets on the lake.
Nice. And you're in Michigan, which is the perfect place for the sunsets on the lake. Oh, how gorgeous. Okay. What do you know now as an adult that you wish you knew as a kid?
Read the boring nonfiction your dad wants you to. Different kinds of learning is super good, just as important as the escapism that you love.
That sounds really specific. That's so good. That's so good. Okay, what's your guilty pleasure?
Soy matcha lattes and Dungeons and Dragons dice.
Okay. Perfect. And cat or dog?
I love dogs.
You have a dog now, right?
Yes, I do.
Don't you?
I do.
Dog?
She is a black lab mix. We're pretty certain she's mixed with the border collie because she is a rescue. We don't know. And she is my baby. She's turning 14.
Oh my God. Okay, that was mine. Mine was Moon, and she was a black lab border collie mix. And she hung in there with us till she was almost 18. So, and
she's healthy.
Amazing. Yeah,
she's healthy.
Moon was like, I gotcha. Yeah, I'm a dog girl too. So, I love this. Heather, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been just a blast. And I've learned actually so much from you in this conversation. And I really hope that, folks also gain a bit about story and and the world of writing, and even how AI plays into all of these things. I think that was really a helpful moment. Thank you so much. And to all of you out there, thank you again for joining us for another episode. Heather's information is in the link below. It's in the description below. Please check it out. You'll learn more about Storyverse Stream when we have Athena, but please look into that as well. And thank you for joining us. Play some D&D. You will not be sorry. My younger son just started, and he's like all about it. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.